Today, we're diving into the world of French painter Edouard Vuillard. Now, he's known for these really quiet domestic scenes, but what's fascinating is that behind those calm paintings is a life packed with secrets and contradictions. Secrets that honestly change everything about how you see his work. So let's unlock his world. Okay, so when you first look at a Vuillard painting, it can be a little chaotic, right? Figures kind of melt into the wallpaper, a dress pattern becomes part of the carpet. The whole scene just vibrates with all this color and texture. It's really easy to feel a little lost in it all. But here's the big question. What if that confusion is actually the whole point? What if the real key to understanding these incredibly powerful and often hidden meanings isn't just on the canvas, but buried in the contradictions of the artist's life? To start solving this puzzle, we have to begin right where Vuillard did, with the patterns themselves. And we're going to do that by looking at one of his early and honestly most disorienting paintings. Okay, take a look at a painting like The Mumps. You can really see his radical style at work here. The person in the background, they practically collapse into each other. The patterns in the room feel just as alive as the person in it. One critic perfectly called it a sea of pretty pandemonium. You see, it's not just a portrait of a person, it's a portrait of a feeling. And this gets right to the heart of his whole philosophy. Vuillard said it himself, "I don't do portraits. I paint people in their surroundings." For him, you just couldn't separate a person from the space they were in. The two were completely tangled up together. And that idea, it's absolutely crucial. So to really get a handle on those surroundings, we need to explore the first of Vuillard's two very different worlds. His incredibly intense, almost claustrophobic, and entirely female-dominated home life. You'll hear Vuillard called a leading intimist. It's a term that just means focusing on intimate, private, domestic scenes. But you have to understand, for Vuillard, this wasn't just some artistic choice he made. No, it was a direct reflection of his actual day-to-day reality. So picture this. After his dad died, a teenage Vuillard became the only man in a tiny Paris apartment that he shared with his mother, his sister, and his grandmother. And to top it off, his mom ran a corset-making business right out of their home. So the space was just constantly overflowing with fabrics, patterns, seamstresses, clients. One biographer called it his pensive prison. But here's where the magic happens. Through his art, Vuillard did this kind of alchemy. He took that cramped, kind of impoverished reality, and he completely transformed it. He took all those dingy fabrics and overwhelming patterns and turned them into what one critic so beautifully called miasmas of sensuous luxury. He was literally finding this incredible richness right in the middle of his confinement. But that confined world, that was only half the story. Because as soon as he stepped outside that apartment, Vuillard lived a totally different life. One that was filled with high society, wealthy patrons, and, yep, illicit love affairs. I mean, the contrast is just stunning. At home, he was the shy, quiet son. But at night, he was a social climber, a nocturnal carouser. He went from painting these small, intense works on literal scraps of cardboard to creating massive, decorative murals for his rich patrons. His life was split right down the middle. His outer world was basically a who's who of influential people. You had the wealthy Natsenson and Hessel families who became his patrons. And their wives, Misha and Lucy, they became his muses and his lovers. He was a key artist for the cutting-edge journal La Revue Blanche, and his work just exploded in scale as he got commissions to decorate the fancy homes of Paris's high society. So, how in the world did he manage these two conflicting lives? For decades, the answer was basically hidden away. But pretty recently, a source has come to light that brings the two worlds of Vuillard crashing together. 46. That's the number. It's the number of private journals Vuillard kept for half a century, from 1890 all the way to 1940. They've been held by a library in France, and now they've been digitized, giving us this totally unfiltered look straight into his mind. And what they show us, it's just staggering. One reviewer, after going through the journals, described the man he found as a creature half passive homebody, half all-night walking, whoring carouser. They're absolutely filled with his secret thoughts and what he called his furtive fantasies. And that, right there, is the key. The whole puzzle of his art is solved by this tension. That strange, vibrating energy you feel in his paintings, it comes directly from the conflict between his quiet life at home, his glittering social life, and all those secret desires he was writing down in his journals. That conflict became the engine of his genius. So this totally unique way of seeing, born from a life of deep contradiction, made Vuillard a true pioneer. And his vision still feels unbelievably relevant today. He was one of the first artists to really get into photography. He used his little Kodak camera not just as a tool, but as a whole new way of seeing the world. It let him capture these candid, fleeting moments, which allowed him to paint ambiguous scenes that don't have a simple story. It kind of makes you, the viewer, an active participant in figuring out what's going on. And all of this led to his most famous innovation, what people call his woman as flowery wallpaper style. By so radically merging his subjects with their surroundings, he was asking this really profound modern question. Where does a person actually end and their environment begin? How much of who we are is shaped by the rooms we live in? And you can see it all come together in a masterpiece like this one, In Bed. This is the ultimate intimist painting. It's a deeply private, vulnerable moment that's been transformed into this huge landscape of pattern and form. The person is barely there, almost completely absorbed by the sheets. It's so quiet, so meditative, and for 1891, it was completely revolutionary. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. In our world today, which is so focused on public image and constantly performing for others, what can we learn from an artist like Vuillard? An artist whose most timeless, groundbreaking work was born from the tension between his public face and his most private, hidden self.